Hi, I'm Chuck Dorsett for Weaver Leather Supply, segment 6 in our series. I've been looking forward to this one. We're going to assemble this beautiful project. Now, the original intent here, let's look at each step and all the tools and materials that are there to help us out. But have you also noticed each and every step, nothing difficult. Leathercraft is just elements and they are all easy to learn. All right, so anything I use in this video, weaverleathersupply.com or check below. We've got links there, going to take you straight to the website. Also, if you want to know when our videos release, just click your notifications. You'll know exactly when these come out. So let's step over here. Let's glue our pocket onto our main body. Our first step, well, simply to remove our tape. Someone forgot to take the tape off at the end of the last segment. I'm not pointing fingers. So let's take our tape off of our main body and our two belt loops. Good. We've got no wraparound from our antique, just what we're looking for. Now on our main body, we've got just a little bit there. Nobody's ever going to see that. Well, except for us, and it'll make us crazy. Anyway, so the big advantage of dyeing these separately, first off, is outcome, and we've got that. But another advantage is that we could simply rivet our belt loops on right now. Very easy to do. Actually, that's going to create more problems than it's going to solve, because when we glue this on, what we'll have to do is we're going to have to let part of this hang off of our punch table to accommodate for that belt loop while we chisel. Then it gets worse, because now we've got to work that around a corner. You know what? Let's just rivet these on. Once this is sewn on, it's going to be super easy to do. Cures all our problems. All right, so with our glue, we're going to go with the barge. One of the biggest happenings in leathercraft in a long time. Barge is now available in a smaller can. Just right for us crafters. This is the go-to for the boot, shoe, and saddle folks. Now with the contact cement, we apply this to both sides, we push it together, and it stays. Love our white glue. This is oddly strong for a white glue. But what we would have to do is drop in our glue on one side only, then we're going to have to press this down and we're going to have to hold it long enough for that glue to set. I want this to go right together. Also, I want this to have enough strength to where when we chisel this, it's not going to come apart on us. It won't. We're going flesh to flesh. Now, roughers. If we were going to glue this, say flesh to top grain, we've got a dye, we've got a top coat on there. So neither glue is going to work real well. We can use a rougher and simply rough an area, so therefore we break through that top grain, glue's going to work nicely. Here's the old school rougher, and this literally will take the skin off of your hand. So for larger projects, absolutely. But that's a dangerous tool as far as I'm concerned. Not really, but it's a good tool and it'll work for larger projects. So right here, let's start off. Now, when I rough this, I don't want to rough off my edge. We're going to create fuzz that's going to hang out. It's never going to go away. But also, I don't really want a very wide path for my glue. We're going to start right up, maybe a little bit below this, because we don't have to glue right to the very end. We just need enough glue to get us close to hold that down for our chisel. Once we sew it, glue's no issue. So what I'd like to do is, starting a little bit below this hole, our uppermost hole, let's just rough along that edge just a little bit. And there we go, up to that line. Now we're going flesh to flesh here. So this glue's going to hold. You don't have to rough. We're just giving it a little extra bite there. Now on this piece, we absolutely could rough this. We could lay it on the edge of our table. I want to avoid the edge, again, so I don't get fuzz, but I can easily work my rougher down the edge, and we can hit our corners. But in all honesty, if we glue flesh to flesh, it's going to be a very good bond. Okay, so with our glue, again, this is a contact cement, so we're going to add this to both sides. In fact, let's start right over here. There we go. I'm going to hang this off the edge. I don't want glue wrapping around the edge of my project. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to rub off the edge. And let's go all the way around. Okay, that piece is done. Now again, starting a little bit below our top holes there, let's lay this on the edge of our table, do the same thing. Now I don't want this terribly wide, But you know, 1/4 inch, maybe 3/8 of an inch, that's all we're looking for. There we go. Okay, that looks good. Now, if we can't get that glue right to the edge, that's going to give us a little help in keeping our edge together outside of the stitch line. So we've got our glue on. Let's give this about 5 minutes. Let that glue set. Our glue has set. Now, it looks dry, but I can feel it. Very tacky. That's exactly what we're looking for. So let's drop this in. I'm going to start right on my bottom. Now, notice this is not perfectly straight. We wet formed this, so it may not be. But this edge is. So let's do our best to follow that edge as best we can. Well, there we go. Our edges look good. They met very well. Now, I did notice right here, I missed some antique. You know what? With that and the ink, sometimes I feel like projects are just spinning out of control. Do you ever have that feeling? Not really, but sometimes. So anyway, this looks good. So let's step over to our main table, work on our edges. I mentioned sanding our edge. If we don't have a perfect meet here, and ours is pretty good, but we can always take a sanding block. Now I would go with a very light sandpaper. This is about a 150 grain. What'll happen is let's just sand that very lightly and we can get that fine-tuned in. But notice too, we're starting to get a little lighter on that edge. Well, let's go ahead and sand just a little bit all the way around. Then we'll come back with our antique and we're just going to put a little bit on that edge just to get it a little bit darker. And maybe a little extra on our edges or our corners. There we go. In fact, we can tell we've got a pretty good meet there because both leathers are coming up lighter. That's a good sign. Now, I'm not necessarily going to go with my gloves here because we're just going to add in a small amount of our antique. So let's get this just on a cotton rag. There we go. And again, we've got top coat both sides, so this isn't going to get any darker. But let's just drop some more antique in. And just get some of the excess off. Okay, we're right back where we started. Easy enough on that point. Now, for our edge treatment, we can go with what's called an edge coat. That's simply going to seal our edges. I'm not a big fan. We see this on a lot of high-end purse and bag. The problem is it's a different texture than our leather, so therefore it's going to crack and peel relatively soon. I want something that's going to wick in. In fact, our antique doing nicely there. But also, edge paints, Sharpies, so many ways we can go with this. We've got an edge roller. We can simply drop this in dye and roll that on our edge. And it does a very good job. But since we used our antique, that's what we're going to stick with. Now, the materials to slick our edge. So many ways we can go. Water, absolutely. That will work nicely. I tend to like the leather balm. You know what? We're already using it. It's going to slick a nice edge. It's got some wax in it, so that's going to look good. Gum trag, literally made to slick our edges. This is a great material. Now, to slick the edges, we've got our slickers. Multiple slots here for different weights of leather, but also right down here we can get in oblongs. We've got rounded edges. Nice point on this. This will actually go in a drill press or a drill. The plastic and the exotic wood. I love both. They both work great. So let's do this. Let's take a rag. Let's dip a little leather balm on this. There we go, and let's just hit that edge. Okay, that looks good. Now when we slick, pressure, not the point. Heat and friction. I don't want to press so hard that I either separate my edge or I bend that edge left or right. So the easiest thing to do, let's lay this on our table. That gives us some good body. I'm going to come up to our largest groove there. 2 4-5s back to back, 8 to 9. So let's slick. I'm going to pay a little extra attention to my corners, but again, let's don't press hard. Let's let the tool do its job. And there we go. That looks pretty good. Let's see if we can see some of that gloss in the camera. Is that picking that up? All right, so let's jump back over to our lighter weight, single 4-5. So I'm going to drop into my center groove. Do the same thing. And there we go. One cool point to this If our corners aren't perfectly cut, this is going to smooth those down a little bit. Now, can we still see that gloss? I can't tell in my monitor if we can see that or not. But nonetheless, it feels good. It's good and slick. Very nice edge. One funny point though, this is actually canvas. This makes a great slick. I can always use this. I can press this down between my fingers. Right here, I'll get a good edge. So let's press that in. And we can slick with that just as easily. In fact, that gives us a good slick. There we go, starting to see that gloss. Okay, let's jump over to our punch table, drop in our chisel line. And another step in leathercraft where we have all kinds of possibilities. We've got a great leather element on the chisel sizes as well as the thread weights. So refer back to that if you're trying to make a call. But the Ritza thread, I love these colors. Big variety of colors, but more importantly, 4 weights to work with. In leathercraft, traditionally, that's very rare. We've always had 2 weights. That's all you get. The deer lace, I love this. Again, the colors, but for our edge lacing. Now, this is one of my favorite techniques in leather, but I don't think I have the patience to do this. But the reason I say that is we need a new sample. We've seen this in the past. But I love the more substantial look of the deer lace over, say, the top grain, but also that flat finish. I think that is just beautiful. Okay, so we're going to go with a flat chisel. This is our 1/8 inch flat. It's my favorite. First off, because we're going to be doing a saddler stitch. So both needles are going to have to go through the hole at the same time. A little bit larger hole, that keeps us from fatiguing our hands as we hand sew. But also, a very clean, very straight stitch line. Now, on our pouch, we could always go with a 6. The problem isn't getting our chisel through the leather, it's getting it back out. I don't want to have to work this so hard that I actually ream out my holes. So we're going to jump over to a 4. Now, one problem here. You'll notice right here at our edge, this tends to bow a little bit. Yeah, we can see that. So if we try to go straight in, we're actually going to come out very close to our edge. We don't want to do that. Now, with an 8 to 9 ounce backing, well, it still bows a little bit, but not so much. But this is something we need to watch out for. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my first tine and I'm going to butt that outside of my pocket. So therefore, we've got one extra loop there that's going to secure the throat down. So I'm going to drop that in. I can actually feel my chisel sink down into that groove line. Yeah, it's super easy to find. Now, I'd love to go straight up and down, and we should. If we had 2 pieces just back to back, didn't have a mold there, we could. But what we're going to do now is let's lean out just about a 1/2 inch, maybe about 1.2 centimeters. So therefore, we're going to come through at an angle. We assure ourselves of not coming through the edge. Let's try not to lean in, but that's an easy one to do. Now, the reason I said I don't like a groove line on the back is because it's going to be hard to hit that with this chisel. But if we lean out just a little bit, we'll be able to hit it every time. So butt that right outside. Let's drop that chisel in. Now I'm going to bring that over about 1/2 inch. Now let's easily work this out. Yeah, that glue's sticking well. There we go. I am right in our groove line. Yay. So I'm going to work my way down to our corner. First tine, last hole. Out. There we go. And let's easily work that out. The 4 tine, there's not as much metal going through the leather as the 6, so it's going to come out relatively easy. And again, we are right in our groove line. Now, when we get down to our corner, I'm going to jump down to my 2 tine. We've got one more straight there. So first tine, last hole, lean out. There we go. Now as we get to this corner, I'm going to put my first tine, last hole, but let's just mark that. Good. Now I know exactly where my chisel is going to be. That's going to keep us consistent going around our corner. So let's drop our chisel in that hole, get in that groove, lean out. There we go. Now we're working around our corner. All right, so let's work down to our end. And our last chisel, let's do one more to secure the outside of our throat. There we go. Now on this, let's double check this. So I am right in my groove line on both sides. I came out a little bit across the bottom. We should be okay. But again, it's the back side. Hard to hit that groove line, but nonetheless, we look good, clean, and consistent here. Yay. Let's step over, knock a stitch into this. Let's start with our trusty sewing pony. If you've ever tried to hold a project between your knees while you hand sew, very frustrating. I'm not pointing fingers here. I've done exactly the same thing. But if you have, this is going to be a game changer. But 2 big points on this. First off, let's drop in some leather up here. Contact cement will work nicely, but that's going to keep us from dinging our project. We can have some sharp corners on this. But secondly, there's our clip. That's what locks this down. What I'd like to do, let's put a little tape over that, because every time we sew, every other stitch, our thread's going to grab that little lever, pull it up, our project's going to fall out. Very frustrating, but also we can ding our project doing that. Now, we've seen these before, but they're my favorite needles. John James number 18. So these are the smaller, if I can hold them, there we go. These are the smaller of the 3 John James sizes. It's got a smaller eye, but that will definitely accommodate our wax thread. But big point, because they're hand sewing needles, no sharp point. That's going to save us a lot of blood and frustration. Wax thread, Ritza, absolutely. But I'm a little deflated because we looked at so many beautiful colors over there. We're going to back up to just a simple bright white. Now, on our tooling, if we've dropped in a color there, let's find a thread. So with that, that's going to tie our whole project together. But in this, I just love the look of a nice bright white thread. Yeah, let's add our tape because, yeah, made my point there. So with a saddler stitch, this is just a back and forth. But what I like to do is I want to put my face, or the side I've chiseled from, to my prominent hand. Now I'm right-handed, but we're going to do this left simply because it's a little tougher to get a camera shot from that side. The point is this, on this side, where we've driven our chisel through, these holes are funnel shaped. So therefore our needle is going to fall in that hole. We don't even have to fish for it. On the back though, that hole is going to be a little more puckered, so it's harder to find. So what we're going to do, start with our prominent hand, open that hole up. Now with our second needle, that just falls right through, makes the whole thing very easy. Okay, so saddler stitch. First hole, 1 needle. So let's take, yep, from there, I know I'm right-handed. So from this side, let's take 1 needle. Let's pull that through, and I'm going to equalize out my thread length. There we go. Okay, second hole, I'm going to lead with my left. Let's get that needle in, open that hole up a little bit. Let's bring our other needle in from the back. Now right here, I'll get these about halfway through. Let's just make an X. There we go. I'm going to pull down on the eye on both sides. I'm going to move my fingers from the end to the tip. There we go. We've got a stitch. Let's draw that in. Good, and I'm going to give that just enough tension. There we go. I can see that sink down in just a little bit. So our second hole, same thing. Now, hand sewing, it may appear tedious, and it can be a little bit tedious, but all told, we can do about 2 inches a minute. So all told, that's actually pretty fast. So I'm going to work my way all the way around to the other side. Then we're going to hide our knot. Now, when we get down to our end, we're going to hide our knot just down inside our throat. So let's do this. I've got 3 holes left, 2 on my throat. So let's take this needle incoming from the face. I'm going to drop that in between the 2. Let's pull that through only through 1 ply. Let's tighten that down. Now on our back thread, let's bring that all the way through that hole. Yeah, we didn't go all the way through, so it's a little hard to find it. There we go. So let's pull that through. Now right here, 1 needle. Let's tighten that a little bit. We're going to tighten that hard here in just a second. Come through our top hole outside of our throat. Now let's come back through from our back side. That same hole, we're simply going to go through our back ply of leather. Yep, there we go. Okay, now let's pull that tight. Good. And let's pull this tight. We're pulling those separately. There we are, so we get a consistent stitch. So now let's tie our knot. So let's take our thread, and it looks pretty close to a left and a right. Doesn't have to be perfect here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my right thread, I'm going to go over my left, circle it, and let's draw that down. Now I've got a small tool here. I've got a notch, just cut in a piece of dowel. So therefore I can press that way down in there and I can really crank down on that knot. Okay, we're doing a square knot. So now I'm going to take my left, going to circle around my right. Let's draw that down in the same way, but really with some depth here, I can use my finger. Good. There, now we've got a very solid knot. Now with my knife, since I rarely use this part of my blade, what I'm going to do is I'm going to lay that part of my blade, I'm just going to lay it on my thread, and I'm going to pull that thread across it. Did you see how easily that separated? Good, so my two little tails are right there. We can tuck those in, but nobody is ever going to see that. That's a good hidden knot. So let's step over to our punch table. We're going to knock in the last of the hardware, and this beautiful pouch is done. I am really happy with the way this pouch is turning out. This looks good. So, to measure for our snap base, we're going to take an awl. Let's bend our flap over. Now we've got some room for air here. We can go a little higher or a little lower, but I'm going to drop it about right there. Let's make sure we're even on both sides. Now let's take our awl and just place a mark. Easy enough. I can see that. So now let's take a piece of scrap leather. This happens to be a very thick piece of scrap leather, but you could certainly glue two 8 to 9s back to back. I'm just going to slide that in there. So again, we're doing a snap here. So let's go with our 3/16 inch. Knock a hole in that. There we go. So easy enough to make this fit perfectly. Now I don't want to set this now. I'm going to set this the very last. That'll be our last step, because if we try to set our rivets here, it's going to crush that. So now that we've got our hole, let's jump over here. So with our belt loop, I'm going to take one of our medium double caps. In fact, we're going to go with the gunmetal, both for our rivet and our caps. That's going to look good. Or our rivet and our snaps. That's going to look very good. So let's drop one in. There we go. Now let's turn this upside down. That's going to look a little odd, but that way that'll flip around, okay? With our caps, and I love the double caps because the caps will snap down onto the post without actually setting the rivet, so that's going to hold for us. But we're using our medium double cap. We're doing two 4 to 5s back to back. The medium, or say a 5/16 inch. So let's do the same thing with this lower hole. Okay, so that's sitting in there. Let's take this. This is simply the anvil from setting our snaps. We're going to flip it over, and I'm going to put that on an 8 to 9 ounce. So therefore, when we slide this in, I've got some good distance there. Let's make sure we're actually on that. There we go. Now, our rivet setter. We've got it concaved in on one end. That's going to keep us from flattening that cap. Now, we've got a little movement there, so let's try to hold that down, get that good and straight. There we go. That's good. So again, we're using two rivets here so that when this rivet's around, that's not going to move around on us. So I'm going to do the same thing to the other side. Well, that looks good thus far. Okay. Now for this lower hole, we're going to have to do a little fishing here, but let's see if we can find that hole. Yeah, there we go. Now let's pick up a cap. Let's bend our loop around. Get that on there. There we go. I'm working left-handed here. Now let's snap that cap. Okay, now it's going to stay. So let's take our time here because we need to make sure that we get this under our rivet and that it's straight. There we go. Okay, notice I can see it push that rivet up. I know our anvil's under that. So let's set this rivet. Good. Going to do the same thing on the other side. Good. All rivets are set very well. That's exactly what we're looking for. Got some good belt loops there. On our snaps, let's go with our, there we go, yeah, antique nickel line 24. So with a line 24 snap, we've got 4 pieces. So we've got a base, naked back, and our cap. Then we've got an inside flange and an outside flange. Really all we're doing is riveting these pieces onto the leather. So if we get these reversed, it's not really an issue. But we're going to go with the way it's supposed to be done. So right here, our indent right at the top. Notice our 24 sits right in that. Now, let's drop this on. And remember, we wanted that a little bit snug. We've got it. So let's take the flange on the outside, drop that on. Now here's a big point, and I get this question often. Folks will say, I'm crushing my line 24 or my line 20. The problem typically, 99 out of 100 times, is that we've got the wrong setter. Notice how similar these are. The smaller, line 20, the larger, line 24. So we can always double check that if we need to against another setter. But if we get the correct setter in here, it's going to work nicely. So I'm going to try to set this as straight up and down as I can because we want that. There we go. Notice how that post is rolling around in there. Yet it's a little hard to keep it straight up and down. But let's take our time again and do our best. We want this set just to where this doesn't spin. So maybe one more good hit there. Yeah, there we go. Set very well, and that looks good. So on this side, let's come in from the back. Now this hole again, it's going to be a little snug, so that snap's going to hold in there nicely. If I can get that in there. There we go. Okay, maybe a little too snug, but you know what? It's holding it, and that's what we're looking for. All right, so let's do this again. Now, we've got our belt loops here, but all told, we're not really going to worry about crushing those. So let's slide this in, drop that down, drop our inner flange on, double check my setters, and let's set this. Good, that sets so much easier. Well, there we are. Let's see how this works. How about that? That is a good looking pouch. How easy was that? Every step. But at the same time, we've got so many options at every step of the process. That's what we're looking for though, a beautiful outcome. Is this the perfect project? Absolutely not. We didn't perfectly hit our groove line. We'll never see that. We've got a small spot of ink, still making me nuts. But right here on our snap, just a hair off center. The big point to this is not a generic plastic part that fell out of some machine. Handmade, and look at the outcome. So every step of the process, unlimited tools, unlimited materials, techniques, you know what? We could go a lifetime without making the same project twice. Welcome to Leathercraft. I hope this series has been good information for you. Had a great time with this pouch, and I hope yours comes out better than mine. Good luck with your projects.